What is old is new again. That is the theme of the year for West Virginia football. And that's very relevant right now because the West Virginia Mountaineers have unveiled a 1965 throwback uniform in which they are going to debut during this 2025 season ahead, the first season of the second tenure of Rich Rodriguez. So it's old is new with Rich Rod coming back and a fresh take on an old school uniform. Mike Asti here on Mountaineer Report with WV Sports Now. We'll be joined here by Cody Nespor as well, and we're going to talk about our thoughts on this new throwback uniform. For the most part, a positive reaction, but as Cody and I know, nothing is ever 100% with West Virginia fans and with Mountaineer Nation. There's been a little bit of a polarizing effect, and I could bring up another year that also would be an anniversary that I do wonder why maybe they are not honoring instead. This is the 60-year anniversary, of course, of the 65 season. We are going to wear this throwback uniform, the baby blue, on the helmet and everything that comes with it. We also will talk about the baseball program once again losing a midweek game to another rival. And kind of a vibe check there as they still have a lot in front of them. This is not exactly a season ruiner by any means, but it did change the dynamic of the vibes, to say the very least. And then, of course, a reset on the football and men's basketball rosters because a lot has changed even since our last show here. Again, Mountaineer Report on WV Sports Now. Cody, first off, how are you?
Okay, good.
Good. Glad you're doing well. And second off, 1965 throwback uniforms. We'll start there. What are your thoughts? You like them? You hate them? You're going to smash? You're going to pass? Where are you? Had to throw that one in.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is long before both of our times. I don't even know how familiar you were with these uniforms before now. They've been unveiled again, and Ren Baker dropped a little bit of a seed last year that Neil Brown was excited for, but he's not going to be a part of this, of course. Where are you? They are now going to wear these. It's a first real true throwback uniform because the Country Roads and the Coal Rush uniforms were just a full new concept. This is harkening back to a past era and really staying true to what they wore in 1965.
Yeah, I think they're cool. I do have a little problem with them. I don't love them. I think they're cool. And my problem with them is the same problem I have with all of that style of uniform is through no fault of West Virginia, Notre Dame has just monopolized that look. And so every uniform in that style just to me screams Notre Dame. And when I saw, I think I was
people keep saying Pitt, but it is Notre Dame. I think it looks a lot more like Notre Dame.
I don't buy the Pitt. I saw people, but when I saw them just scrolling on social media, I saw the pictures first before I saw what it was, and I thought it was just a Notre Dame uniform.
Yeah.
At first glance, and that's no fault of West Virginia. It's just because Notre Dame it still is that style, and that used to be the style. But I think they're neat. If they wear them once, I think that'll be neat and people are excited about it. They're certainly not ugly, right? That's always a big plus for uniforms is they're not ugly. They do look cool. It's just I don't know if this wants to be a repeating thing or what, but I like them.
Well, they have made it clear that they're going to wear the Country Roads again. They're going to wear the Coal Rush again. Those are not retired for good. Obviously, there's been different variations of the Country Roads uniforms the last few years. So it's not like they're just completely one-shot deals. This might be more of a one-shot deal because it is a 60-year anniversary of the 65 season. I think part of this is Ren had an obsession with that baby blue on the helmet, and he's made that very clear to everybody since he walked in the door as AD. So I think that's why they kind of went in this direction. I also do think I get what you're saying. They do look like Notre Dame. They 100% do look like Notre Dame, more so than Pitt. They look like Notre Dame. You could argue the Jerry West throwbacks look like Pitt, but these look like Notre Dame. But as they kind of said in their answer to some of those questions in the video the program posted, once you agree to do this, what can you do? They want to stay true to the look of 65 because there were a lot of fans saying, well, the way you avoid the comparisons to these other programs, you throw the flying WV on there. I want to see more gold. I want to see a different outline that's more to the 80s plus type of look. And they literally said, well, what you're saying didn't exist in 1965. This is a 1965 throwback. This is not a new uniform like the Cole Rusher Country Roads. So if we're doing a throwback, you can't do any of those suggestions.
Right. Yeah, and I think for
outside of the Big 12 logo, which has to be there, obviously.
For throwback uniforms, I much prefer like accuracy, right? Like just stay true to it. And I do like that about these is like, uniforms back then didn't have logos and didn't have so I think it is cool in that respect that I would much prefer stay true to it. And even if it looks a little weird or funky, which I don't think these do look weird at all.
No.
But I loved the Steelers Bumblebee uniforms because
very polarizing. Accurate. I was going to bring them up actually. Very polarizing.
And because they were weird and that kind of stuff. And this WVU throwback, like I said, it's not weird. It doesn't look bad. But I do like that it is accurate. I do like that it is that, like, immediately looking at it, you get a sense of the era, and I think that kind of stuff's important. And like, don't modernize it, right? Because if you're gonna honor 1965, like, go full into it, and they did. And I do give a lot of credit for that.
Yeah. Now, what I wanted to bring up that I also tease a little bit, that I get the baby blue. I think, again, Ren Baker loved the baby blue look. There are a lot of fans, some nostalgia to that look that wanted to see them again. I think that's part of why you're honoring this and doing that season, of course, the 60-year anniversary. And people who do bring up that it wasn't the best season in program history by any means. They went 6-4 overall. They did win a conference title. It is a conference championship season. It's one of the 15. It does count as that. So there's reason to honor it for being a conference champion, even though the overall record is not a 10-win year or anything wild and any major trophy. But they did win a conference championship. They did go undefeated in conference play. That was kind of the structure back then, going way back. I mean, everything's really claimed and controversial back then. Anyway, you win a conference, that's something. And that's an achievement, and that's why they're honoring that year. But, Cody, the 1975 season, they won 9 and won the Peach Bowl. That would be the 50-year anniversary. It's not the baby blue, but there's a little bit of a look. I believe that blue got darker, and the uniform's a little different. So I wonder if the obsession on this baby blue are they now punting on honoring 75? Which, if you're ranking seasons in program history, I would think you'd rank that as ahead of 65, even though 65 won a conference, a Peach Bowl title. That's a major deal, not only then, but even still. And that's a year Bowden was coach. So I would think that would have been a 50-year anniversary of a major bowl game win with a Hall of Fame coach that's from the state, even though he did leave and didn't finish, of course, and maybe there was some controversy there at the end. He's since passed away. There's a lot of the Bowden contingent that are around the area that like to come back that are still quasi-WVU fans. I know that for a fact. Obviously, they root for Florida State too. They would have probably all been willing to come and have a big celebration. I mean, maybe you're going to do that at 60 years for that season, but it's not like they're honoring both in conjunction. So what are your thoughts of that? Just any weirdness of there's actually a better season on another benchmark year. They could have honored that instead.
Yeah. I just don't, you can't be perfect and honor every year.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
It kind of gets to the retiring numbers thing of sometimes you just got to pick and choose sometimes. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Like people talk about, well, if you're going to retire this number, you got to retire that, and you're kind of saying if you're going to honor this year, you got to honor that. And it's sometimes you just pick and choose and do one at a time.
Well, then why do you think they pick 65 versus 75? Because I think it's pretty. I don't think we'd have to argue that 75 is a better year if you're ranking program history. A 9-win season and a Peach Bowl is better than a 6-win season and a conference title that no longer then existed decades later. Or maybe you think 65 is better, but I think most people believe 75 is a better year in the program history.
I don't know.
I like making Cody think here on Mountaineer Report.
I don't know if there has to be a big reason other than just
okay, yeah,
just 60 years. Let's do it, right? It is funny.
50 years. I mean, that's all I was bringing up. It's just an interesting.
I looked up the 1975 jerseys look more like Pitt than the 65 ones. They look a lot more like Pitt.
Yeah, that's true. No, 100%. I mean, they can't say they want to stay away from the Pitt look, because if you look at the Jerry West throwbacks, that looks like that definitely looks like Pitt. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously there was a little bit of a calling for the baby blue, and I do get it. And I'm not going to bog down in the history that sometimes, you know, I'm a little bit of a history nerd. Not everybody listening is going to be, but it's just interesting when you bring it up, because it's a 50-year anniversary, which is a major benchmark year for anyone with any season. Usually programs, franchises, if they won a title 50 years ago, they're going to honor that. And the Peach Bowls is basically as best as you can get at that point. There was not a playoff, and they're not able to do so because they're honoring 10 years earlier in a worse season. It's just a little bit of a weirdness. I think it's fair to bring up, because that 75 season is a special year.
Think about it like this. If they were to wait 10 more years to honor 65, how many people are going to be left that remember 1965?
I guess you have to do it now or don't do it. Yeah.
I was going to say, like, my dad was born in 1964.
Okay.
Right? So it's like, people in college 20 years older than my dad, you know, how much longer are those people going to be around to, you know, remember? Oh, I remember when they wore those uniforms, right? And I remember that year. Right?
I don't know if your dad wanted you to date him on the show here.
I'm just adding context.
I get
but you know what I mean? So like, if you do now, like if they're going to say, we're going to honor one of these 2 years, and let's do 65 now, because there are still people alive.
Sure.
That remember that were in college then, that watched that team, that will remember those uniforms. I think that could play a pretty big part in that.
Yeah, and you also have the Backyard Brawl 2025. This is the final year of this current series. They'll play again in 2029. This is the first year of Rich Rod playing Pitt since that infamous 2007 game, and the 1965 season included a blowout win over Pitt. So maybe that's part of it as well. You have the win over Pitt in 65. You have the win over Pitt. You win a conference title, and then you can honor it now with this being a win or lose in 2025. This is going to be remembered as a benchmark year. In 100 years from now, if they're separating the years on a Wikipedia page or something, they're going to, I'm sure, the 2025, the return of Rich Rod, will be a paragraph, like good or bad. So this is going to be a benchmark season, and it's an iconic uniform. You could certainly argue that even if the 75 season was a better year than 65, comparing seasons, Peach Bowl over a conference title, more wins, etc., that the uniform of 1965 is more iconic than 75 when you have that baby blue. Like, when else are you going to do it? Yeah, you got to celebrate these guys before they're just all long gone. So that I get all of that, but it's just interesting when it's not like a 50-year anniversary is just a random year. That's also one of the top 10 most special seasons in program history, that you're then honoring a different one. And I did see some fans bring up that, why are we honoring 65? They only won the 6 games. They won a conference title. They beat Pitt pretty big. In that type of era, that was a big deal. I do think it makes sense to honor in that respect, beyond just because of the jersey thing. But I don't, so it sounds like, of course, you don't have any problem with the Flying WV not being on there or anything like that either. Because there are some fans, especially if you look at our Facebook page, that's a big thing. They really want that Flying WV on there, and it didn't exist in 65.
I'm a big fan of some of the older logos. I really am. This one on this helmet with the state outline I really like, and I really like the one that's just WVU with the circle behind it from.
I know what you're talking about.
That probably would have been like Major Harris era, but like they have some really cool throwback logos that I do like to see. Not all of them are like the old. I don't know if you've ever seen the Throwback baseball logo. That thing's atrocious.
No, 100%.
That's a monstrosity. Yeah. But some of them are really cool, and I do like to see them.
Yeah, and football wise, this is open to the public usually, certainly before games. If you want to walk into the trophy room at the facility, all the helmets are there, throwback uniforms are there. A lot of them able to be viewed by the public. So, yeah, I mean, again, I've done rants that I don't know if the program respects its past enough. So to hear Ren Baker literally say a comment that we need to respect our past more, and they need to do things like this to do so, that I think is a positive, because despite a rough 6-year stretch under Neil Brown, this is the 15th winningest program all time. This program does have 15 conference titles. They won conference titles before the Big East conference titles. You shouldn't just count the Power 4 or Power 5 conference titles. The other ones do count. If everyone else is going to count them, you should too. So if you have a benchmark year to when one of them was won, go ahead and honor it. I do think, and this didn't occur, but in an alternate universe, Cody, where Ren just had an obsession with the baby blue look and it was a bad year and they lost to Pitt, for example, I don't know, maybe then I would want to harken back too much. Like, just, I guess, last point on the uniforms. If 1965 was a year where they won 4 games and they got blown out by Pitt, but it had the really cool baby blue that the fans wanted to see, would you then be a fan of honoring a throwback uniform for a season that is undisputed bad, hypothetically?
Well, no, I think in that case you don't single out a year. You'd say like 60s throwback, right?
Yeah, unless you wore the uniform only in a small chunk of time. But right.
Yeah. So I think in that scenario, you just don't be so specific, right?
Yeah, but this works. Yeah,
like
but
the Pirates aren't doing early 2000s throwbacks, right?
No, but
like
hey,
2004 throwback.
Yeah, 2002, 2004, 2010 throwback. Wow. But some of those, I mean, I'd like to actually bring back the red hat every now and then, even though 97 was a losing season, but there was some good parts of it with the combined no-hitter. Cody Nespor, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report, WV Sports Now. Wanted to talk about the uniform because fans obsess over the uniform look. And as much as there's always comments, no matter what outlet posts this, on, oh, I don't care about honoring that. What do we have to do to win games? It's more important than honoring. But in all reality, this fan base does obsess over the look and what this program looks like and that uniform. And there are some that didn't like the Coal Rush, didn't like the Country Roads, doesn't like the throwback. They just want them to wear the Flying WV, the old gold and blue from 1980 on. And there are some fans that prior to that, they don't want to see again, and they don't want any new type of flavor. And Cody, what I say to that is, that's just no damn fun. That's just no damn fun. And I know for sure the program pulls the players on what they want to look like and what they want to wear every week. So you want to get mad at the players, but you don't want to have them be that boring. They make money from these uniform looks. It's part of endorsement deals. Have some fun. But I do think honoring a throwback, I'd like to see more throwback uniforms. Yeah. Obviously the Jerry West throwbacks, now the 1965 throwbacks. Maybe wear a legit Major Harris throwback era, or go back and wear a 70s throwback era or a 50s, 40s. They had a different look almost every decade throughout their history. So yeah, I'd like to do this even more. Now to switch gears to more of actually what's been going on the field for a Mountaineer team before we get more to the roster conversation for football again, and then also basketball. The Mountaineer baseball team lost I guess I could call it a thriller. It really was, but in horrendous fashion, with a walk-off error at the end. They blow a big lead in the 9th inning. They squander the 4-run advantage, and they lose on the road to Pitt. Now, they split the season series with the Panthers. They also lost in kind of a heartbreaking fashion the week earlier to Marshall, who we debated on whether they're rivals in football, and I don't think so, but they're definitely rivals in every other sport, so that's a loss to a rival. That stings, even though they still won the season series against the Thundering Herd. They even had a loss to Penn State. These are all programs they're better than right now, for sure. Nobody would deny. And it doesn't really matter to their overall season because they could still very much win a Big 12 championship. They're going to have a national postseason. Yeah, hosting is maybe what it could matter to, but if you go off the Marshall loss and then they didn't even sweep in the weekend against Texas Tech, they actually moved up in some polls. They barely moved back in some polls. They stayed the same in other polls. It didn't really kill them. They're still inside that top 16 benchmark spot. If they take care of business in their next series in conference play, I don't know if a 1-run loss to now a Pitt team that at least has a winning record, despite not nearly as good as you, would drop you 4, 5, 6+ spots. What are your thoughts on, the concern level now for this team, and if it should bother the fan base that the strategy of these midweek games against rivals is to throw the back end of the rotation, to do different things in the bullpen. Sometimes they rest players. They did play Hussey, but sometimes they rest the stars. Like JJ barely played any of those games in the past, even though he was hurt a lot. Because the fan base wants to win those games, even though they don't matter as much to the program. Like Maisie to Sabins, they don't care as much based on their strategy alone, and they lose a lot of them. But the fan base does, so that's a different, back and forth you have to deal with.
Yeah. That's kind of the trap of these midweek games is they don't matter, right? Like WVU's still 2 games ahead in the Big 12 standings.
Yeah.
A midweek loss to Pitt doesn't do anything in terms of winning the Big 12. It doesn't do a whole lot in terms of ranking, and probably won't do a whole lot in terms of like hosting for the postseason. But it does a whole lot for, as you said, the fan base, right? And it's so like losing these midweek games doesn't matter at all, really, for what you want to achieve. But when it's Pitt and Marshall and Penn State 3 weeks in a row, it is going to matter to the fans. And that's kind of the like I said, the trap with these is like they could play anybody in these midweek games, right? Like they could bring in any random nothing team and beat them 10-0. But they scheduled these regional rivals for fans, right? For interest, for an easy trip, for all of that, and then they lose them, and people don't feel so. Like I have seen people, I wouldn't say upset, but concerned about baseball, and here WVU goes again, and but like you got to remember, like this doesn't matter, right? Like it doesn't change the Big 12 standings. It doesn't change.
As we're speaking, they're 2 in their last. They're 2-3 in their last 5. That's besides the midweek overall. They're 2-3 in the last 5. That's not good for a top 15 program. That's another added part of the concern, maybe.
But
two of those were midweek rivals.
I was gonna say, but 2 of them, and you're right about they throw starters. They're not the weekend starters, right? They throw. But
is that the problem? Because I mean, I think as much as we could debate whether they should play Marshall in football and have done that, and people just won't stop doing that, it's almost like an addiction. But in every other sport, we kind of agreed that it's great when they play these regional rivals. It certainly is great for both programs. They all want to play. The baseball program has had a better relationship with Marshall and Pitt and all these programs than really any other athletic program. And Saban's keeps saying and has been saying that they want to keep that. But that doesn't work hand in hand with their strategy. So that's why I brought that up, because if we all agree, okay, you have plenty of games in the schedule. It's not going to hurt you. It's not going to do what football may do, where they're going to build a mural for 100 years. Go ahead and play Marshall every year. Play Pitt every year. Play at PNC Park when you can. Play Penn State. Play Ohio State now that they're doing and they're extending the region. Do that. Problem is West Virginia is saying, I want to do that. I agree, guys. We're not going to try to win them, though. Like that, I don't think I wrap my mind around. I get you want to set up for the weekend, and maybe it's just because Pitt was having a worse year, but Pitt went all out, guns blazing. Everybody was ready to go, playing. Mike Bell had a speech. It was a Rudy-like atmosphere there, and WVU walks in. You're lucky to even see our starters. We considered Hussey not even playing in this game. We're going to have our last man on the starting rotation start this game, and then he'll get shelled, and we're not even going to worry about it, and we're just going to keep it moving to conference play. If you're going to play all these regional rivals when your other counterparts in the top 15 are just playing random teams that are not rivals of theirs, is there any sense that there should be an obligation to try more to win them? And I'm not saying that in the middle of the game they're not trying to win, but if you get what I'm saying, they're not. They could change who they're starting these games. There's already a 3-day layup prior. A pitcher at most needs 5 or 6 days. You already have So they played on Tuesday. You at least have all day Tuesday, Monday. They didn't play Monday, of course. You have Sunday, but you could easily have a better effort in terms of who you're strategizing to play in these games. And in years past, they did sit out starters. Like you sit out your starter in the brawl. Doesn't that not sit right with you? That would never happen in football or basketball or any other sport.
I mean, it'd be this, like I said, they could schedule Kinesis to come down from New York and play.
But should they just do that if they're not going to try to win the rivalry games, though? I don't think the fans want to keep losing these. I think the fans almost getting to the point where they don't want to play them if they're not going to win them.
I don't know. I don't think, because it's like they had beaten Marshall 6 years in a row before they lost, something like that.
Yeah. And they still won the season
it's like,
series with Marshall, to make that clear.
So it's like, I don't know. I think it would be a far cry to just be like, we'll just play nobody, right? Like, we're upset Pitt beat us in the midweek, so we're just gonna, we'll bring Kent
Yeah, and
State
that
in
would
next year, right? And it's
obviously,
like,
like, the
oh, okay.
RPI wouldn't be helped doing that, right?
So that's
But you played Tuesday, and then you don't play again until what, Friday? You could
well,
throw a top end of the rotation starter, and he would still get a 4-day rest.
But you're just not gonna, because the only thing that matters is your Big 12 games. So you're not. I mean,
right?
The
They're
worst thing that
exhibition
could happen,
games, the midweek games.
the worst thing that could happen is somebody gets hurt, right? The worst thing that could happen isn't that you lose to Pitt; it's that somebody gets hurt that you need to win your Big 12 games.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
it's
the second worst thing that could happen is if they don't end up hosting a regional, and then somehow the committee makes it clear they do overall wins.
Well,
I mean,
if they,
I don't know. I mean, if they drop
They're
into
gonna-
17 from 12, then that would be a different
they're
conversation.
they're gonna have 40 wins. So if they don't host a regional, it's not.
Do you remember what happened to the basketball team? Do you
Exactly.
remember the shows leading up to the basketball? I mean, it was almost like we shouldn't even keep talking about this. And they're in 111 brackets, and they didn't get in March Madness. They should still host, but D1 was very hesitant to rank them in the first place. I don't think they will. If they lose the series over the weekend, and after we're recording here, that's different. But if they end up ranked 18th next week, and and D1 writes their little article and says they lost that midweek game, I don't think that'll happen. But that then will be like, man, that then did kick you, because it happened 3 straight weeks. It's also the uniqueness of, you're just not losing one of them. You're losing 3 straight weeks to Penn State, Marshall, and Pitt. And it is funny how this is social media works, but certainly how even fans work, Cody. I'm sure you've seen this. Marshall and Pitt fans are acting like they won the season series, or they had this major win. Pitt and West Virginia split the season series, and they still beat Marshall in the season series. It's almost like the fan bases are thinking, well, we won the last game, so the first one doesn't matter. Like, West Virginia won in April. We're now in May, and they lose the May game. In baseball, that's just equaling things up. It really shouldn't be bragging rights into the offseason.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I was going to say is, like, maybe you don't need to play Pitt and Marshall and Penn State multiple times every year. Which I'm sure it's want to do the home and home, right? But like they
wanted to play at PNC Park too. They got that
in past years. They've played them once. Like Marshall, play them in Charleston once. Pitt, if you want to go back to PNC, play there. Play Penn State, but like that's the other thing I would say is maybe you don't have to play them. Like those Pitt, Penn State, Marshall, and one game against Ohio State was your whole midweek schedule. Maybe you could get some more teams in there that are, worse and easier. But at the same time, I mean, these are, power conference team. Well, not Marshall, but, ACC, Big Ten. I'm sure it does help the strength of schedule.
No, yeah, RPI is part of it too, and it does help. I mean, Pitt, despite barely being over 500 in an overall record, I believe they have a 54 RPI. So I think they only have 25 overall wins, but their RPI is good for a program like that, and they're well below 500 in ACC play. But I mean, their overall standing is not horrendous. So that is, if you would have beat Pitt, that would be a better quality victory than likely who else you would put in there in replace of them. And maybe that is part of the strength of schedules what held this team back from being ranked earlier in the year. So now this is what Saban said too. If we play tougher teams and we don't win them, the strength of schedule actually is better, but now we're losing games. And if we win a lot of games and our strength of schedule is not good because we're playing easier teams, then people say there's no point of even playing the game. It's almost like damned if you do, damned if you don't. The only way to get around that is you play the tougher games, you play the rivals, and you throw the front end of your rotation, still give them the rest instead of the back end. But as you're saying, they're not going to do that because in all reality, outside of hosting and national rankings, they are really exhibition games. And I think this is where the fan base at times, Cody, I'm sure you've noticed this. This is where some of them and most of the contingent of fans that are mad about losing to Pitt and Marshall and are now saying, the year doesn't mean as much, or woe is us, or it's going to be WVU all over again, even though they don't matter as much. those are the same people that are still upset they're in the Big 12 and it's not old school Big East football and baseball and all the other sports. So that would be an ideal world. I think we all would love to have, that matter again and go kind of back to how it was, or at least many of us, but it's just not reality. It's not going to happen. If you didn't go the Big 12 when you did, you would have been left as a group of 5 program, basically. So they're not in the same conference anymore, and they don't matter as much. And they don't even matter as much in football, because if you win the Big 12 and lose the Pitt, you can still get in the playoff based on the current format. They don't matter as much in general as they used to in past eras. But in baseball, it matters the least. I mean, soccer, football, basketball, it matters a lot more, women's basketball, than baseball. They are really exhibition games. As long as you take care of business in conference play and in the weekend series, those midweek games are kind of just, even the national rankings, they barely look at them when they're moving teams up and down. It's really on what you do in conference play. But you do not have any major concern on the team, separate from just the midweek results, on the team in general. Obviously, they're going to set the wins record and potentially still win the Big 12, and they're going to be in the postseason. But in terms of actually making noise, winning in the Big 12 tournament, etc., because they're not puttering anything away, but the last 2 weeks, they've not been as good as they were the prior 3 months, to be fair. So there's any reason for concern at all?
No, they won that series against Texas Tech, who's an elite program. I believe they swept UCF. Yeah, they did. Which, and so it's like they can actually win the Big 12 this weekend. Because I believe, let me pull up this. They're at 18 wins. They need 21 to lock it up. So if they sweep Kansas State, they win it. Or if Arizona State loses a game, obviously that the magic number goes down. So they, this series against Kansas State, they could lock up the Big 12. And like I said, like that's all that matters, right? If they had been struggling in the midweek and then, struggled against UCF or lost that series to Texas Tech, even though Texas Tech isn't as good as they usually are, like then you'd be concerned. But, they're still beating the heck out of the Big 12 teams. So, that's just why. And plus the way they lost to Pitt, 5 runs in the bottom of the ninth. It's like every team has a bad inning, and sometimes that bad inning comes at the worst possible time. And kind of the same thing with Marshall, where
they should hold that lead, though. I don't care who you're plotting out.
You're right, but
they should hold that lead.
But it's not, it's not a trend. It's not a
right.
So the weekend stuff is so much more important, and to, especially with the the cancellation with Texas Tech, and then they had the doubleheader and they lose the first game, to come back and win in the evening and then win on Sunday, like that's really, really good. Obviously,
I was waiting for it to be here's West Virginia goes again. If they would have lost that second game of the doubleheader, then I think the vibes would have been horrible going into Sunday. That would have felt like 2 years ago.
That's kind of what I was expecting too, Mike. I was like, here it comes, right? An elite Texas Tech program that isn't very good this year,
right?
Comes
still
in
talent
just,
there, still talent, yeah.
Absolutely, and I was thinking the same thing. Like, oh, they're gonna get swept, right? They lose that first doubleheader, and I'm like, here it is. Here's reality.
I mean, even if they lost the series, I think fans would go into the new week being like, oh no, we're just getting in position for a regional, and now they're gonna lose series and conference play. I think that would have felt like that, but they did winning that second game, and Saban has talked about this too. They're a very resilient bunch. They lose a game, they have a hiccup, they have a bad moment, and they turn around the next day and they win, and they make – we talked – I think you brought this up on our last show, that they make it so fans cannot do, oh, it's typical West Virginia going to blow it, because the second people start thinking of that, they then turn around and have a big win or have a big inning or have a big impressive showing or get on Sports Center. So, yeah, that was very important to win game 2 of that doubleheader after losing that first one. And, the other thing to throw out there is, if you remember, they had games against Oklahoma State because of a disaster canceled. So you do hope that if they don't sweep the rest of these conference games for the program, they could end up in a weird funky where they're sharing a conference title again because of win percentage, because they're not going to play those games again. So they do need to keep on winning to avoid that. They want an outright title. They want it to be outright.
Yeah,
so if they would lose a series, they would get into that neighborhood.
Yeah, so the scenario is 21 conference wins is the magic number right now, because Arizona State can't reach 21.
And they're at 18 now, I believe.
Yeah, West Virginia's at 18. And so, but the way that the magic number works is every game now that Arizona would to lose for the rest of the season would drop that.
Right. They'd have to win too. Yeah.
Yeah. So it looks okay.
It looks okay, but we've seen crazier things, and I'm just saying that it would be it would be typical stuff if they would have end up sharing because Oklahoma State, if they somehow they win one out of the last four, and then because if you remember, Cody, it's not long ago this basically occurred. They literally they lost the final series of the season. I think they had one win in their final 5 games overall in the last 2 weeks, and they went from a conference championship outright that people like us probably exactly were saying, well, it's all locked up. Don't worry about the midweek. They have the title locked up, and they parted away, and they did get a share. They got a trophy. They got rings. It's on the wall. But if you recall, a lot of the West Virginia fans did kind of have their balloon popped, and there are many that still do not claim that as legit because they fell into it. They fell backwards. They didn't go forward to get it. That's why they want this outright title so bad. So they end up sharing again because they also lose in these final 2 weeks, second time in 3 years. That then would feel a bit rough.
That was the worst thing ever because they needed one win in that last series at Texas, and they got swept. And then it was on Longhorn TV, so nobody could even watch it. I remember some of the places in town held watch parties that weekend, and they got swept. Of course, they got swept, and they didn't win the Big 12.
And the thing is, again, they won the Big 12 still, but that's where the West Virginia fan comes into play. There were many that were like, "Oh, I don't even want this title now," because they lost their way into it. So they do that again. That really would pop a balloon. I do think they need to lock this up and win this outright because they have the lead now. Because I mean, Saban's knows what happened a couple years ago, even if the players all don't. So I don't think he wants that on him again. And in all reality, Cody, if you have a share of a conference championship, you have just as much right to the conference title as any other team who has a share of the title. But West Virginia was the only fan base that was not unanimously excited about it because they fell backwards and got swept at the end. If that happens again, you just don't want that scenario and have history repeat itself. That would be pretty much the only issue if that would occur again. But they've been taking care of business in conference play even after losing the midweek games. So I do not think they're indicative of how they're going to play moving forward. But falling into another share when they should have it outright. Winning it outright would feel better than 2 years ago because that was you got swept at the end and you end up sharing it. And they put that on the wall anyway and have a trophy. And have you ever seen the ring from that share? It's gigantic. It looks like they won the World Series or Stanley Cup or something. I cannot imagine what they're going to do if they win it outright. And then if they win a conference title and win in the tournament, wow! I mean, they're gonna have rings galore. It's gonna be crazy for those players and everybody involved. So that's still in front of the program despite the midweek loss to Pitt. Now, what I do want to get to now before we pack up this particular show, obviously basketball had a major commit roll in. They hadn't had much action in a couple weeks, kind of, fell under the radar a little bit. But then because Jordan Forsythe, they're another 4-star commit to be as an incoming freshman joining DJ Thomas. And they are still building this team. It's not 100%. I believe they would have 12 players now. You'd like to add a couple more. But adding him and getting a 4-star high school recruit for a head coach that's only been a D1 head coach for 2 years, and that was the concern. What could he do recruiting? Coupled with everything they've done in the transfer portal with Eagle staff, Brennan Lorient, etc. Now, what do you think of the job Ross Hodge and his staff have done overall recruiting wise since being hired?
Yeah, I think I think you almost couldn't ask for a better plan, right? Like the last time you and I talked about this, we were like, Brennan Laurie can't be your best player.
Right.
You get kind of your star with Eagle staff. You've got the role pieces look great. You do get 2 or 1.5 ish really good high school recruits. I don't know about Thomas, because he was going to North Texas, but Forsythe is supposed to be one of the best shooters in the country.
Yeah.
And so it's really easy now. This is kind of what I talked about several months ago with the football team is you can kind of start penciling in the rotation. And that's when you start looking, you're like, hey, they look pretty good. I think the only problem, somewhat ironically, it's the same as last year's. There's not a lot of size outside of
There's
Harlan.
more size. There's more size than last year, but yeah.
But there's just, I think that's maybe the one thing, and it might be too late in the off season now, but like you'd probably like another true center, and just a little bit more. But like otherwise, like it looks like a pretty good roster, right? Like you can pencil in the starting five. You can kind of guess what the 8 man rotation would look like, and it doesn't look that bad, right? And the last time we talked, I said like it's promising that they're getting guys who've actually played and produced in college and not going and getting like upside guys. I think you saw the first one of those in the kid from South Carolina. He's the first one that's like hasn't played a ton, hasn't produced. But like I said before, they did a good job going out and getting production in guys that aren't big question marks. And so now if you want to go kind of scrape, end of the bench type of guys off of other teams just to gamble on, that's not going to hurt you. Like if Morse, I don't know, Ugasuk, I assume that's how you pronounce it. If he, doesn't play this year, like it's not going to hurt you, right? You're just gambling on some talent there, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't kill you, because you got those other guys early in the cycle, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are a few more like even JUCO or just young guys that didn't play, and I believe they have 5 roster spots left. There's no reason not to use them. Bringing guys in, even if they just sit on the bench all year, like Jake Gower or Harris Elizovich, just to see, just to see what you got, just to practice, really.
Yeah, Cody Nespor, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report, WV Sports Now. That's pretty much the situation. Yeah, I mean, they have clearly star players in Eagle Staff, Brandon Lorient, Honor Huff. Like, these are going to be the best players. Jackson Fields. These are likely going to be the best players. Jasper Floyd. Like, these are going to be the best players on the team. They kind of have, that probably is, they kind of have a starting rotation kind of probably mapped out. We talked on a past show, though. Do you kind of go with the group that I just said, or do you want more size like you're saying? Because if you do want more size, maybe you make one of those guys a 6-man type off the bench and throw more size into the lineup. The concern is that their starting rotation could be small. If you're saying here are the best players on the team, the best transfers, the best recruits are the smaller end players. They do have a bigger overall roster than they've had in recent years, though. There has not been that go get a rebound since Culver with this program. Mm-hmm. They kind of now have that now. And maybe Thomas, Cody, you're poo-pooing Thomas. I get he's not a 4-star, but maybe he'll earn some minutes because he's 6'7". Isn't he 6'7", 6'8"? So maybe, you'd be like, okay, if we're going to play you this year, maybe you're going to get some rebounds for us. Like, you're going to get in there. That's going to get them some PT. So they have more size than they've had in recent years. He has brought in some transfers that maybe not all from the Power 4, of course, but they were players that Power 4 programs all wanted. Eagle Staff was very coveted, even though he wasn't from a Power 4 program. They beat out many of those for those players. They have experience, some having been in the NCAA tournament before, even though, of course, Ross Hodge has not coached in the tournament as a head coach. And then you also blend it with some solid high school recruiting. And they get Forsythe as a 4-star. He was going to Xavier, like he was going to a solid program. So, yeah, I know he left there because of a coaching change, but they swoop in and there were other power programs and solid programs that wanted him. I mean, you look at these offers, Cody. I mean, Kentucky offered some of these kids. I'm not saying they were high on their priority list because they're Kentucky. They can get somebody else, but it's not like these programs just throw out an offer just, for giggles. Like if they're looking at a kid and offer him, then they know that maybe he's at minimum going to be the back end of their bench, and West Virginia ends up with those players. I think this is as we stand now, and there are some spots available, this is a team that should fight for tournament contention, should be a team that is able to at least do well in out-of-conference play. The question mark always is the Big 12 play. They got big wins last year off a transfer group with DeVries. We'll see if they can do that again. It's hard to do that, of course. That'll be where Ross Hodge is really tested on what just DeVries did and how he's compared to that. But they should be a fringe tournament team. You win a couple of those games, they go one way, they go, from the other, and maybe the committee helps you a little bit more this year than last year, and maybe you bounce in. But at least if they're close and they're at least a bubble team, I think the fan base would give it, a go for the next year being behind Ross Hodge. If they fall down to 13 wins or something wild, then I think the concern is it's a two-year D1 coach, and you just had a 10-win turnaround. You should have made with DeVries. He leaves. Is he better than Ross Hodge because he won so many more games, but also a transfer roster, and you're now struggling in year one? That can't happen. But as long as they're close, I think it'll be okay. And I think that's the team they have right now. Eagle staff scored 51 points, in a game last year. That's a sharpshooter and a score no matter who he's playing against. So there's a reason why a lot of other major contending winning power programs did want these kids, and they're going to West Virginia instead. So, and even future recruiting, getting a 4-star for the future that you're likely going to keep and develop, even though you have to re-recruit them every year. That's a positive and a feather in the cap of this staff as well. Now to switch gears to the football team, and I think it's still too early to be able to predict any wins and losses for them, even though we did do that a month ago, and now the roster is totally different. But since our last show, which not that long ago, but since that show, they went from cutting 25 players, losing a few more, to now bringing in 20-plus new players, seemingly some lateral moves, but also it appears the depth of the offensive line, the D-line, the linebacker room, the secondary is improved. They're also beating out some Power 4 programs for these players, and they're even getting some Power 4 transfers. Fans were calling for this for a while. They're now getting some Power 4 transfers, including some players from the SEC. So now, do you have any different thoughts on where the football program stands today that we've now seen Rich Rod say, okay, I cut these players, it was a risk, but now I do more work in the portal, and I don't know if there's, guarantee home runs, but I don't think there's any way to say he didn't at least get back to where he was and didn't at least have a solid run through spring. The numbers are back to where they were. I guess he got his hard edge guys, but he has added some Power 4 transfers in the mix too.
Yeah, it feels like every time I feel like I get a handle on the football roster, I just immediately lose it.
That's
and
fair.
you're right. Like there's a degree to which I'm like, I don't know. It's like I look at these guys, like I'm just like no clue if this team's good or not. But like you mentioned it, I think offensive line depth was a huge win this spring. I think the unit is in a lot better spot than it was before the spring portal. There's some spots like defensive back is one of the, like, I look at those, I'm like, I don't know. I have no clue. Right. Like linebacker, you feel decent about. Defensive line, you feel decent about. Like wide receiver, I'm like, I don't know.
I was going to say, what about wide receiver? Yeah.
It's like no clue. Like running back, you feel great about because Jaheim's there. Quarterback, I think you'd be cautiously optimistic. Like I said, offensive line might be the best. Continuing a Neil Brown trend, might be the best unit on the team. But like as a whole, it's like I don't know. I don't know if you feel the same way, Mike. Like as a whole, I cannot wrap my head around like, is this team good or not? Right? Like
it's impossible to say 100% because we're just you can read the resume of even some of these Power 4 transfers, and then you're thinking to yourself, well, Rich Rod just had players that he started off spring saying he liked on face value. Some of them he brought in, some of them were transfer additions. If you remember, Cody, he had Power 4 transfer additions back in the winter. And then he went to the spring and said, on second thought, I'm cutting this player. Some of them even being the Power 4 additions. One of them was a tight end. And then he's since redone it, and now he cuts the Iowa tight end and brings in North Carolina tight end. They're both Power 4 transfer additions. They both played sparingly. They both were depth pieces at their previous school. Now he's going to elevate them, and they say they're hard edge, and they're going to figure it out. But he's not going to get this spring portal is riskier, Cody, because unlike the winter, you bring him in, and weeks later you can see him on the field and say, oh, I was wrong. No big deal. I messed up, and I'm going to go ahead and into spring portal and redo it. There's no more portal windows. So this is now the group that you're going to go into fall camp with. And if now you say, well, I don't really like this kid that I brought in, then you're kind of stuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And we kind of talked about it when the 20 guys went into the portal of like, this is a riskier, right? And you're right, because like you can't like this just is your roster now, really.
It got
there's not. I mean, there's
scandal here, like, or yeah,
like
this got
you can't. There's not another portal window.
There's
thank
not another
God.
portal window. Right.
Thank
yeah,
God,
Lord.
Before the season.
Yeah.
So it's like all these guys you've brought in the spring portal, like you just kind of, to a degree, just cross your fingers and hope that they're good, because there's no more do-overs.
No.
And it's
harder on the staff, because you can't. I'm sure in spring ball he was dangling over, like, if you don't pick up more effort and be more hard edge, I'm going to cut you. You can't really say that to a kid in fall camp, because they're going to be like, Rich, like, I mean, how many of myself do you have here? You can't just punt a season. He already made it very clear, I can't go 3-8 in year one now like I did in 2001. So he has pressure on him to win right away as well, that he's well aware of. And he's going on all these national shows in the midst of changing the roster, talking about winning a national title all left and right. So,
well, thank goodness they have 50 assistant coaches now, right?
So and they got all the assistant coaches to help them, and also, well, they got
all these new players.
Well, and I've always joked with all of our colleagues too. We can all get it ready, Cody. That, I mean, unless something catastrophic occurs, then not only do they have 50 coaches to help develop these guys, but unlike Neil Brown, and I'm sure he'd roll his eyes if we sent him this clip, that they have the cushion. 1-0 is going to happen. Write it up. It's going to be the 1-0 first time in years, because they're starting with an FCS program in RMU at home, whereas Neil Brown was starting with Power 4 opponents and often going on the road in those games. And obviously he wasn't a good enough tenure and deserved to get fired. But that week one is a cushion now for Rich Rod that he has in there. Or at least have that, and he can kind of figure things out even in the middle of that game, you would imagine.
You might as well pencil in 2-0, right?
Well, I mean, Ohio's, it's a little different. You have to win, but I'm not I'm going to pencil. I'm going to put a pen for RMU and maybe just pencil Ohio. Ohio was good last year, but they're it's on the road. New coach. Yeah, I don't think they're going to lose that game, even though some people are trying to predict that already. I don't think so. But RMU is a lock, obviously.
I think that game will be a lot of fun. I think, I've heard this from a few people. I think that's going to be a crazy road crowd for WVU.
It should be. Everyone's going to go to that.
I've heard a lot of people being like that. The people that go to one game a year, they're like, yeah, that's the game I'm going to. Right, because it's right over in Ohio, and it's I assume it's cheaper. I don't look at ticket prices, but
yeah. And in terms of road games, that's probably the closest road game. Pitt's at home. Cincinnati's not. They had the road game against Cincinnati last year. Like, that has to be the closest road game, just off the top of my head.
Oh, absolutely.
By far, because they're a lot this season's where a lot of those road games are far, and it's kind of clumped together in the middle of the year, going to the West. So,
so that should be a really fun. And some people poo-poo going on the road to play a group of 4. That should be a really fun game, right? And I hope the people, hopefully they win, and the people that go have a good time, and right, they're not afraid to do it more in the future. But I don't know why I got on this, but that's
I mean, I don't want to do the whole Marshall show again. I'm glad you didn't bring that up, because we're going to get that in the comments. So if you're going to play Ohio, you might as well play Marshall. And that, if you have any comments there, the past episode of Mountaineer Report is what you need to listen to. We already went through it all on the different dynamic of that game versus Ohio, and even what Marshall wants out of it. But you get the 2-for-1. It is odd to play them year one of that on the road. It is very odd. It would be they would have no road out of conference games if that was at home, though. That's the only out of conference game on the road, because the Brawl is at home, and of course the FCS is. So I don't mind it for that reason. I guess you got to win it. I mean, you shouldn't go. It goes without saying. You got to win the Group of 5 game. Here's what I'm going to add. I have been a big proponent, Cody, and I think you would even attest that the 2 people in all of WVU that are about the schedule, like Ren Baker and then Mike Asti, in terms of play the FCS, play the Group of 5, and play 1 Power 4, not a conference. We've been banging the drum for years. Ren has now clearly gone in that direction, unless they get a big payday, obviously, for that Virginia game at a neutral site next year. But this is going to be the normal plan, and I've been a big proponent of it. But if you go ahead and lose the group of 5 game, it does ruin the steam a little bit. So you got to kind of take care of business. And the point of that is to get those as wins. So, and that was the difference of the Neil Brown era with 11 power fours that made it too hard for you to do that. So this is the plan. This makes sense. Ren Baker likes it, but you got to get the win. There is pressure. It is on the road. It's normally a good program, but they're going through a transition as well.
Mike,
Granted, not as wild as West Virginia.
Let me ask you one last question.
Go ahead.
This is something I've been thinking about a lot. Would you like WVU to do one of these international games?
You mean play internationally, like play like what Notre Dame's done, and
like go to Ireland like they did last year.
So here's the thing. It obviously will be really, really cool to do. There is a risk that takes away from the cool factor. And if you're Ren Baker, I'm sure he would do it if it was a financial boon and it would be a great marketing ploy and it would be really cool to do and you're selected for it. I think just on what I know from the program, they would do it if offered that opportunity. And I think it'd be very hard to say no. The back of my mind, especially in year one for a new regime, hypothetically, would be it makes it harder in out-of-conference play. And I don't mean even just that game, but then you're looking at travel coming back from that game. You're looking at a major time difference. These are 19 to 22-year-old kids for the most part. Some are older, of course, because of the era, but many of them had never been on an airplane before they get to West Virginia if they're freshmen. So that time lag's part of it. And it would be really cool, and you can't say no, but if they would go ahead and do it and then lose that game and then go ahead and lose the next game, like what if you had it again in the Ohio place and then you go ahead and have the brawl, but Pitt played Kent State or something, you're at a disadvantage because of jet lag, because of traveling, because you had a harder situation. So I would be 100% for it, but what I would not do, Cody, I would not do it unless the payday made it so astronomical that it benefited you because you're going off of the normal schedule plan. So the only reason why I don't have a problem with that Virginia game, because next year they're going to have 11 power fours again because they're going to play Virginia in a neutral site. It's not normally a good program, but still they're playing a power program. But they're getting $2.5 million, I believe, is the number out of that. You can't really say no, and it's not like you're playing Alabama. You should be able to win it as well. Your fans can still get there. If that's a situation where you're getting a lot of money and it's reasonable, like if you want to play Pitt in Germany or something, like that's a fair game, that'd be great. Like, okay, do that type of thing. But if you got to go ahead and like play Alabama out there and then it's a guarantee loss, or Ohio State or Notre Dame or those schools, and then you come to like if you had Robert Morris a international game in Dublin, Ireland against Notre Dame, make that really cool for 80, like in 2028, somehow hypothetically they do that to make it special for the 1988, memory of that. And they play them. And the next week you play the brawl. As cool as it is, you're making your out of conference schedule too tough again. So I wouldn't do it if it burns you overall. I don't want to punt a year just to do the cool thing, but it is cool and it'd be hard to say no.
Yeah. Presumably, I think they try to do those games in the week 0. Right, so they don't have those travel issues. I think it would be cool too. The only I doubt how much of the WU fan base would be able to shell out the kind of money to actually go to that game.
That's true.
So that's like not to throw water on my own parade, but that is it would be sick. I do wonder about if fans would actually go.
Yeah, and we actually have somebody here in the chat who says, yes, they play it in Germany. They play Country Roads at Oktoberfest. It's a big thing there. And that also would be cool because, as you've seen, fans sing Country Roads all over the world. Even fans who don't care about West Virginia, they sing Country Roads. So imagine if they're doing it at a WVU game internationally in Europe or wherever. That would be very, very cool. If they do it in week 0, maybe that would help you. Maybe you get an earlier bye because now there's the 2 byes in the Big 12. So maybe you would get that week 1 of the Big 12 season by at least. They would give that to you if you had to do one of those. That would be cool. But again, I don't think you got to make sure it aligns with everything else you're doing. But I don't think the program would say no. I think if the money is there, the prestige of doing that is there, I don't think you can say no. I think they would do it.
Yeah, and Yormark, the Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark, he talked about doing like Big 12 Mexico. I think that plane kind of died on the vine, but he had talked about that.
I remember that, and that's not as bad travel-wise,
a few years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, you assume that's probably more for Arizona and Arizona State than West Virginia,
Right.
or the
Right.
Texas teams than
But
West
even if
Virginia
you're
and
playing them,
Cincinnati.
like that's not as bad as going to Germany or going to Dublin in
Yeah,
terms of travel, or even if you played one in Canada. I mean, if you're gonna go south, yeah. I mean, obviously every political thing going on there that might make it harder. I don't know if Trump's gonna do the opening coin flip for that one, but if you're gonna go down to Mexico, why not go up there?
yeah.
Yeah. So that is another almost a debate for another show. But I it's really cool. I think it'd be hard to say no, but it's the same thing where like fans are like, just play Pitt and Virginia Tech every year and make that, and it's really, really cool.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it makes it harder on you than everybody else in the country. You
Yeah.
don't want to make it too difficult on yourself because your fans, Ren Baker says this all the time, Cody, and it is very, very true. We can debate schedules, uniforms, the past, everything all day. If the current team wins, fans are not mad. If the current team loses, fans are mad. It's all about winning or losing currently. So you got to do what helps you win as much as you can within reason now. And stacking a schedule is not going to do it. And international every year wouldn't do it. 11 power fours every year wouldn't do it. Like, you just got to put yourself in the right position.
I thought you were going to go with a different Ren quote and say, you can't run an athletic department on fan vote.
Well, that he does say that, and it's very, very true. And this is also how Ren Baker is a great politician, Cody, because he finds a way, and more power to him. He's smarter than me in this regard. He finds I don't know if you've noticed, like, he finds a way to say some of the things that I say, but in a way that comes off better. Like he
people don't get mad at him.
Right, like he'll say a comment about the schedule format that I've been yelling for years about. Stop playing 11 power fours, even if you got to scrap a rival. Fans will get irate because they want to play all the regional games. Ren Baker walks in the door and basically, even on the show that I had him on, was like, Mike, I totally agree. It sounds very sound. He then looked into it. I told him to do so. And then he kept looking into it more. And then he kept saying the same thing. And whenever he said it, nobody, he didn't get any mean tweets. It was like, Ren, I guess that makes sense. You got to do what you got to do. When I said it, it's like, man, you're responsible for them not playing Virginia Tech anymore. Stop saying that. It's like, I'm not. But like, they don't run amok with Ren. And obviously there are maybe some fans who are polarizing with him. But he just has a very politician-like way of being able to put the same thing. Or when he makes a comment like what you're saying. I mean, the translation to that is, fans, you're not always that intelligent. You're sometimes very emotional, and I can't do what you want all the time because I got to actually, have a sound mind. Not all of you have a sound mind. That's really what he's trying to say. But it really comes across like he sat down with his wife and was like, how can I basically trash the fans in a nice way that has everyone happy? And he finds a way to do it perfectly. So yes, he did make that comment. I remember at Ross Hodge's intro, there was a couple comments from him that were just like, I was thinking, like, these basically are kind of trashing the fans, but nobody's mad. And if I said this would be just, everyone would run amok. So yeah, Ren Baker's a politician. He could be governor someday if this goes well. But yeah, that's why he's the AD and I'm not. But he does have a way with words for sure, and a way with those pressers. And he did say that. Yeah, I can't run an athletic department like the fans would, or to paraphrase that. So he's right, and he knows that. But that'll do it for this edition of the show. Mountaineer Report here, available on WV Sports Now and available everywhere you get your podcasts. Of course, check in with our coverage at WV Sports Now and follow both of us on social.